St. Lucia, this is Open Mic, and we're now back to the third segment of our program. When I left off, I highlighted the difficulties St. Lucia is experiencing with the VAT situation. I've been discussing that now for years. I have there are individuals who have not agreed with me. I'm not an economist, but I continue to maintain as a business person, I have enough experience with Ireland to see when something is wrong. And St. Lucians just have to look around and find out the difficulties people are going through at this point in time. As I said a bit earlier, I'm of the opinion that the VAT should be removed completely. We should revert to a consumption tax and put a 5% sale tax on everything coming to the country. It simplifies everything, and all they have to do now is to get the various accountants to do their homework to make sure that the revenue doesn't falter. Since that has been on my mind for such a long time, I thought it fitting to bring in the past Minister for Commerce, who had the experience, who saw what he did under his watch and where St. Lucia went, to highlight what I'm saying, because he was in the government and he should really know. Guy.
Thank you very much, Mike, and thanks for having me on your program today.
Thank you.
The VAT has been a vexing tax, I call it. From my days as the president of the Chamber of Commerce, there was the discussion on VAT. And we always felt that VAT would be a problem for especially for manufacturers. Like you, I've always favored the consumption tax or putting a sales tax on the tail end of any transaction.
Right.
The lower the tax, the better people will comply. The higher the rate of tax, the more burdensome it is on people's cash flow.
That's right, yeah.
And so it's always going to be a problem. In the printing business, we are manufacturers. And before the VAT, we paid a consumption tax. But the consumption tax, it varied depending on the product.
Yes.
So from 2% or 5% up.
Yes.
And you paid the consumption tax at the tail end. So you cleared your raw material from customs, you paid no consumption
tax. So it wasn't onerous.
So it wasn't onerous, it wasn't killing your cash flow.
Right.
But with the VAT, before you can even turn around the material, you have to pay 15% consumption tax on importation, or even if you buy it locally, you still have to pay your 15% consumption tax. So it puts a burden on small businesses and put a burden on your cash flow.
I've seen it,
And so it increases the cost of doing business. And that is why it has killed a lot of businesses, and it is putting an undue burden on the manufacturing sector, especially. So I've always said from the time we were discussing it many years ago that it would be better to put a sales tax on, and it can vary because they're luxury goods, you can put a higher rate of tax on, and the other goods you can put a lower rate of tax. And so that you'd better spread the tax burden instead of killing especially the manufacturing sector.
You know, it's funny that you should say that, Guy, because I never knew that you had that in mind, and from the time I heard the VAT was implemented, I thought the sales tax, because having lived in America and listened to many people in business, I'm not saying if America does something it's necessarily right, but when I talk to people and I tell them that we have to pay VAT on food, they say that's impossible, you can't be right, and they want to know why the cost of food. And the thing is, it's the ordinary man that's getting affected because he can't claim back any VAT. His dollar is only worth 85 cents. But I'm enjoying what you're saying because I didn't know that you were on that same wavelength.
But even increasing the threshold for those who do not have to pay the VAT is not really helping, because even if I fall within the bracket.
Yes.
Okay, I cannot charge the VAT onto anybody.
Right.
But I'm paying the VAT on my raw material.
That's right.
And so obviously the VAT will be passed on to the consumer.
Correct.
And it's increasing the cost.
And that's where the problem is.
For instance, I mean, I'm in the newspaper and advertising business. There was no VAT, or there was no tax on advertising. Right now, there's a 15% VAT on advertising. So you place an ad in my newspaper, your costs have gone up by 15%.
That's right.
Now, in a depressed economy, what happens?
That's right.
People have X amount of dollars to spend. So obviously, they will cut back on the volume of advertising that they're doing.
Correct.
Because one ad that used to cost them 15% less before is now costing them 15% more. And it's no more value that they're getting from that.
Right,
So obviously, people have to watch their cash flow. People have to watch their expenditure. And so it has a ripple effect on the business
And
community.
you know the hard part about it, Guy? Take, for instance, on commercial properties. If you said you have to pay VAT.
Yes.
Now, the Prime Minister wants to know why the construction industry is not going forward. Because when you go and you sell, because $1 million today is nothing for a property, and you have to pay 15%, that's $150,000, okay?
Exactly.
And where is that money coming from? Because even, for instance, not that I'm against, for instance, taxes being paid by contractors, but every time you do a job, you have to take off 10%. But you want to know what has happened? The people who are unaccustomed to paying it, you just increase the price by 10%. That's all.
But that's exactly
it happens to me all. So it's another cost to me again.
It increases the cost of doing business.
Yeah.
And all the small businesses who are paying rent, your costs have now gone up by 15%.
Correct.
Because there's VAT, 50% VAT on your rent. So in a depressed economy, and that is why when we were in government and cabinet, we decided that we could not impose VAT when the economy was down.
That's right.
And it has always been the case. You increase taxes when the economy is up. When the economy is doing badly, you have to give concessions for businesses to survive. We see it happening in all the big developed countries. And so it's no different in St. Lucia. So when you keep adding, no wonder there's so many small businesses going out of business, because the onerous cost, when you increase the cost of doing business, a lot of people cannot survive.
So you are aware of the small people going out of business?
Oh, very much so.
Because
very much so.
I thought it was only me when I saw all this, having about roughly 60, 70 tenants, small people. 70% are gone, never to come back. And these were people who were there for 15, 20 years and surviving. So what does it tell you? It tells you that something has gone wrong.
Something has gone wrong. The policies that are being implemented are not working. Maybe a business place that is selling goods that they have cash flow every day may be able to survive.
Like a big supermarket, correct.
But persons who have to be giving credit to do business, to be able to do business, and then you have the costs, your banking charges and all of that, you just can't survive. And that is what the VAT has done to a lot of small businesses.
And as I mentioned earlier, look, construction is an area that really produces employment and turns money over. And that's why the construction is so dead. So St. Lucia, this is one of the things that, whoever wants to feel its criticism, it's a reality, and we have to look at it.
It's a reality on the ground.
While we are on that whole story, I've just noticed on the newspapers this week that a French guy who was in prison for 4 years is all of a sudden released, and undoubtedly it is pressure from the European Union and the French government. And my big worry is that, not worry, my concern is the fact that St. Lucians have been talking about people in what's the word, in when they stay in the prison, in remand.
Remand.
But that it is so unfair. And I mean, it was said that the Prime Minister felt that due to separation of powers, he's not going to do anything about it. And all of a sudden, in 3 days, this thing has happened. St. Lucians are up in arms. Not I'm against the French guy going home, because I think 4 years for an incident that wasn't proven is worrisome. But what is your take on all that, Guy?
I have a problem with persons being on remand for an inordinately long period of time. It is your liberty being taken away from you.
Correct.
Don't forget our system is that you are innocent until proven guilty.
Correct. Unlike the French.
Unlike the French. Right? According to the French, you have to prove your innocence. Here, the authorities have to prove your guilt.
Correct.
But having said that, this individual, there are St. Lucians who are on remand for much longer. We know of cases of persons
8, 10 years.
10 years, 12 years.
How can that be right? Yeah.
It cannot be right that you have taken so much of the person's life from them, and there's no compensation for them if it's proven that they're not guilty.
Correct.
Now, we know that the Europeans, that the French, the head of the European, the
and
EU,
the British,
and the British met with the Prime Minister. Okay, and they gave certain ultimatums. And I would say, I remarked at the time that it is unheard of in our history that ambassadors have felt so empowered that they can summon the Prime Minister to meet, and when they were through, they held their own press conference and indicated that they're coming back at the end of March and they expect to see certain things happen. But he has compromised his own self. Here's the reason people feel so emboldened and empowered. Now, I mean, we met with the ambassadors, and I would say, how in the world can the ambassadors meet with the Prime Minister, have their own press conference, and say what it is they needed to say to the press in the absence of the Prime Minister? Why wasn't the Prime Minister with them? Why wasn't there a joint press statement? And why is it, up to now, the Prime Minister has not met the press? Okay, if he didn't want to meet with them, why didn't he meet the press afterwards, have his own press conference, and indicate what his government's position was? He has not done that, but he allowed his people and his press people send out press statements, hiding behind that. One of the demands that the French are making is that they need to see something happen with this French national who has been on remand for 4 years. And they were very angry that this was going on and that the government didn't seem to be doing anything about it. And so they made the demands. Now, the government was held to ransom. And so, despite the fact that the Prime Minister keeps saying there's a separation, there's the judiciary, there's the judiciary, and he's the administration, the executive and the judiciary. It begs the question then, why a judicial matter like impacts, why is the Prime Minister, who is not head of the judiciary, right? Why is he the one that has the impact report and playing politics with it? Why, and I said that from day one, that he handled this impacts thing in a very irresponsible manner. That he should have, once the investigators had completed their work and submitted their report with the evidence, it should have gone directly to the DPP for her to take whatever action she felt was necessary. But once it got into the hands of the Prime Minister, and then he went on television and decided to
cherry pick
the items he felt that was going to give him political advantage, he has compromised the report, and therefore he is not observing the separation of judiciary and the executive arm, in my opinion.
Now, tell me something. They are due back in St. Lucia towards the end of March.
The end of March.
What is your prognosis as to where we're going?
Well, it's obvious that the Prime Minister and the government is trying to appease them. First of all, they have ensured that the French national was taken care of. And at the Shangri have a lot of persons who are sitting on remand for much longer than the French, who are still waiting their day in court. We still have a broken judiciary in the sense that the government knew that the DPP was going on retirement. There was no succession. So we still don't have a DPP in place. So we still have people languishing and not being able to get the day in court. And you still have what I consider mishandling of the impacts by the current government. So the Americans are still making the demands. The British are still making the demands. The French will certainly be a little appeased that their national is safely back in France. But we're still not where we ought to be. And it shouldn't take the foreign nationals or the foreign powers to put pressure on our government to do the right thing. They should be doing the right thing without that kind of pressure.
Guy, we have just come to the end of the third segment of our program. But when I come back, I want to throw a question at you because, you know, on more than one occasion, the Prime Minister says, well, Guy Mills was a national security and all these things he's talking about, that why did he do something about it? St. Lucia will be right back.